Hi everyone, I'm Jocelyn, and I am grateful you're here. You're listening to the Starting with Gratitude podcast. This is a safe space intended to host meaningful conversations exploring all topics of the human experience. Every conversation starts with gratitude and remains rooted in gratitude. After you listen, make sure to join the community by subscribing and sharing. I am so happy you have joined us.
I'm grateful that I chose to bet on me and my gifts.
I'm grateful for my mom, grandma, friends, and just love overall.
New chapters unfolding before my very eyes, old chapters closing in divine timing.
I'm grateful for my optimism.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to give and the opportunity to receive.
I'm really grateful for the women in my life.
I'm grateful for this cocoon phase, as I like to call it, that I'm in.
I am grateful for being able to be here as a vessel of information, as light, as love, and to lead.
If I could spend this closing finale recap episode just expressing my sincerest gratitude, I 100% could, and I 100% am, because I cannot even begin to tell y'all how grateful I am for this podcast, for this community, for this beginning, for this unfolding. Season one is done. We did it. And next week we're stepping into season 2, which y'all, let me just say, it's going to be so good. We are going to gain some new perspectives, hear some new stories, learn from new experiences. And I'm not going to get into that because I am here to just bid farewell. And, I could not just go into season 2 and leave season 1 without stepping in and sharing my thoughts and expressing my own gratitude for all that conspired, all that came from, all that bloomed in season 1. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Tiana. Thank you, Doris. Thank you, Swopes. Thank you, Zuela. Thank you, Yadi. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Kai. So much. All my guests, you all said yes to me. You all said yes to one of my ideas. You guys said yes to a beginning. You all said yes to a vision. And I simply could not have done it without you. I obviously need to have guests in order to have the podcast that I'm having. And I had some pretty amazing guests in season 1. And I am so honored that I had the opportunity to not only hold space for these real, honest, vulnerable conversations, but also had the honor to share them with you on this platform, on my podcast, on our podcast. This isn't even mine anymore. This is ours. And I just want to give my sincerest thanks to every single guest that came onto the show, because all of these episodes touched on healing in some way, shape, or form. All of these episodes touched on self-accountability. All of these episodes, in a sense, were a mirror reflection for every guest, because every guest had to face themselves in the conversation and share their stories, share their healing, share their experiences, and had to be vulnerable. And I'm so grateful. I do not take that lightly. And I am so honored that I have the energy to make people feel safe and comfortable enough to share these kinds of conversations with me, let alone have these conversations be published and out in the world for others to listen, for others to watch. So I just really want to express my sincerest, deepest gratitude for every single guest, because you all made this possible. You all said yes to a beginning. You all invested in me. And I'm so honored. I really am. I'm so honored. And on that note, I am so grateful for all of you who listened, who downloaded, who watched. You know, the videos haven't been getting as much traffic as the audio, but it's all good. Just know that the video is up on YouTube on my channel, and I know that one day they are going to get the light that they deserve. But wow, thank you all for your support in season 1. To be completely transparent, we got 500 downloads in season 1, at least 500. I haven't checked today. But for some of you, 500 may not be a lot, but the way that I look at it, 500 people, 500 downloads, that is at least 500 times where someone was impacted by something that I created. That is at least 500 times that someone was influenced, impacted, inspired by a conversation that I hosted, by my podcast. My podcast touched 500 downloads. That is amazing to me. The impact of 500 people downloading, 500 downloads. Like, thank you. I am so, and to think that it's only going to grow from there. I just get so excited thinking about how this podcast is going to unfold, how it is going to continue to grow, the amazing conversations that are continue to be had in this space. You know, I could have simply had conversations about work and business with all the guests that I had in season 1. And if we just focused on work and business, let me tell you, the conversations would have still been absolutely incredible and inspiring, because all my guests do amazing work and are doing amazing things and are so inspiring in all that they do and have done. But I'm very much so aware of all the other podcasts and conversations and interviews that they themselves have had relating to work and relating to business. And though we touch on that, I didn't want it to be the main theme of the conversations that take place on this podcast. I really wanted to create a safe space where we could really talk about life and be vulnerable and be honest and be real and see each other in a way that we may have not seen each other before. I really wanted to create a podcast where you recognize one of my guests and you see them in the light. You hear a story that they share that you hadn't known before, that you had no idea about, that you know, you become inspired by them in a whole new way. And I also wanted to have guests on this podcast to where if you don't know who the guest is, you're still incredibly inspired by that guest because of the stories simply because of the stories that they share. If you look at the descriptions of the episodes, you'll see that I also don't really even put too much attention or focus on the titles of my guests, because again, I didn't want it to be about that. Like, if you all seriously want to see that the work that they do, there's so many ways that you can learn about them through other interviews and articles and, you know, their own social media that you can check out to learn about their work. But I really just wanted to create a space where we're diving in deeper, you know, we're acknowledging that we're not all about work here. Like, our identity isn't revolved around work. And I feel like I really wanted to make that transparent in this podcast. And I feel like that job, that desire is being fulfilled. And that is another thing that I'm just so grateful for. And, you know, if you all have not heard every single episode or watched every single episode, I highly encourage you to do so. And I genuinely feel like every episode will make the listener feel seen in some way, shape, or form, will make the listener or viewer feel inspired in some way, shape, or form. And for me to confidently be able to say that just makes me feel so good and makes me feel like I created something that has the potential to have longevity, to be rich, to be meaningful. And if you know me and my work, you know that that is what is most important to me, is the value of whatever it is that I'm creating. And so this podcast has just brought me so much fulfillment and joy, because I feel like it's really content that matters. And not only that, but the concept of it, you know, every single guest has expressed gratitude, and we are collectively, as listeners, as guests, as myself, all of us tuning into this frequency of listening to these stories and listening and expressing this gratitude, we are cultivating these high frequencies together. And so there's just so much more at play here with my podcast. And I know that it's only going to continue to unfold in more divine and beautiful ways. And it just makes me so excited. And I couldn't have done it without all of you who have downloaded and listened and given this new podcast a chance, and taking the time out of your day and investing your energy in listening and downloading and viewing this podcast. So thank you so much. Know that I acknowledge that. Know that I am very much so aware that you are investing time in me, that you are investing your energy into listening and downloading and watching whatever way it is that you interact with my podcast. I acknowledge your interaction as an energy exchange, as an energy investment, and know that I am just so consciously aware and grateful of that and of you. And honestly, this podcast would not be what it is without you all listening and contributing to the cultivation of all that it is, and listening to the stories, the vulnerability of what my guests have to say. So thank you all so much, man. Like, I'm just so happy. I'm so happy that I said yes to me. I'm so happy that I gave myself the opportunity to see how this unfolds, give myself the opportunity to tap into the potential of something. I'm just so grateful that I started, you know, that I had the courage and the tenacity to just start. And if you listen to the trailer that I dropped for this podcast when I first announced that it was going to come in 2021 back in the end of December, you know, that I expressed, you know, having wanted to do this podcast and have a podcast for a very long time. And so just been a very, very fulfilling journey for me. I feel like the writer in me is so happy. The conversationalist in me is so happy. The healer in me is so happy. I'm just so honored. And I'm so excited for you all to continue to grow with me and for us to grow together and for us to witness the evolution of this. I have such big dreams and aspirations and visions for what this podcast will evolve into. But right now in this moment, I'm so grateful for what it is. Even without a nice studio and nice equipment, I'm so grateful for it because it's on the way to all of that. I promise that the audio is going to get better. Promise the conversations are only going to get better. I promise that I'm working on not saying so much. And that is one thing that I learned. And I was going to share, you know, some lessons that I've learned through this beginning of me doing a podcast and learning how to do a podcast and manage a podcast, because it is my first time. I am a first timer and I am a beginner at the podcast aspect of this. But the biggest lesson learned for me is realizing that it is a lot of work, especially as someone who's doing it alone, because there's just so much to it. There's the outreach, there's the scheduling, there's the figuring out what to do, having a backup plan should one of the guests cancel. It's the recording, it's the prepping for the interviews, for the conversations, it's the editing, because it's both a video and an audio podcast. So editing both of those things, exporting the video, designing, doing all the graphic designs, rolling it out, promoting it. It's a lot. It is a lot. And I'm still very much so figuring out how I can best manage this podcast on my own as it continues to grow and as I continue to move forward with the seasons. As you can probably figure out now, every season is going to be 2 months long. One episode is going to drop every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And so that makes 8 episodes per season. And I'm just, you know, in that space of figuring out how I can be most productive with managing this podcast, being consistent with this podcast, making this podcast the best that it can possibly be in the season that it is in, while also balancing all the other things that I do and that I'm working on. And so that has been the biggest lesson for me, as well as, you know, I don't know if it's a lesson necessarily, but more so just a reminder of, you know, the power in starting, the gratitude and fulfillment and relief even that you get from just starting and giving yourself that opportunity to try. You know, starting can be the hardest part sometimes because there is that uncertainty, because there is that friction and tension, because there is that, you know, perfectionism that can settle in. But, you know, being a beginner to me is something that should be congratulated, should be celebrated. There's so many people that are just afraid to start, that when you are someone who does start, that does begin, it's incredible. It is so telling of how you believe in yourself, how you love yourself, how you invest in yourself. And even if you fail, quote unquote, because I don't believe in failure, you know, you tried, and trying is amazing. It is, you know, what more can we do? So I just want to, you know, express that and hope that for those of you that are watching and listening and witnessing me in my beginning and doing it anyways, without the fancy studio, without the professional podcast equipment yet, because all of that is going to come. Okay, the audio is going to get better, you know, but I just hope that you all feel inspired by this, and you all feel motivated, and you all feel like you can start too, even if it's not going to be as you envision it in your mind yet. You know, you can't put that pressure on yourself. So I just really wanted to say farewell to season 1 by expressing this gratitude, by letting you all in on the journey, where I'm at, how I'm feeling about all of this, and, you know, letting you know that, you know, this is here for the long run. Okay, this is here for the long run. Like, I'm really, really putting in that work to be consistent with this and really see this through. And again, can't do it without all of you. So thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to my future guests. Thank you for the yeses. Thank you for the stories, the experiences, the vulnerability. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the investment. And I'm excited to continue to grow together in this journey. And season 1 will forever hold such a special, special, special place in my heart. So all that said, let's head into season 2 and let's continue to express gratitude. Let's continue to start with gratitude. Let's continue to cultivate gratitude together. And I will see you in the next episode in season 2, episode 1. Here we go.